Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Always Network's first webinar of 2020. And it is on this controversial topic of, is funding from the lottery permissible in Islam? This topic about lottery funding has been on our minds, especially amongst the AWN team for a while now. And we are honored to be hosting it now with some amazing names. So please do stay tuned and stick around to hear everybody's opinions and stories and case studies, which will be fascinating. So just want to move on with the agenda. There'll be a welcome and introduction by myself from Always Network. I am Aisha, one of the team members. And we have a surprise guest, who is Mufti Barkatulla. He is the prominent Islamic scholar, mashallah, alhamdulillah, that we've got him, and he'll be sharing his wisdom. And we're also joined by Mufti Faraz Adam. He's an Islamic finance consultant. And we're also joined by Heritage Funds, Liz Ellis and Chris Mason. And we have Director of Black Southwest Network, Sado, Jiirde. Well, before we start the webinar, I just have to say that please use the Q&A box to ask any questions for our speakers throughout the webinar. It will only be seen by the panelists ourselves. No, it won't be for public viewing. So if you do also have any issues during the seminar, please use the chat function and our admin team will be able to assist you. So that is our housekeeping rules for today. Right, before we kickstart, it is poll time. Just need to find out what your views are about this. Do you feel lottery funding is at odds with running a Muslim charity? Do you feel lottery funding is at odds with running a Muslim charity? This is very, very, very interesting. It's great to find out what your views are just before we kickstart, actually. And I'm just gonna wait until you get your votes in. It's really important. This is good to know. And it's good for our muftis to know as well before we start this fantastic webinar, inshallah. Okay, it's looking undecided. Okay, let's end the poll now. So this is it. Sorry, I'm also checking. Undecided, right? That is very interesting, and it's close yes, and then it's a no. Okay, well, we'll find out later what your opinions are at the end. Right, so as mentioned, a little bit about who we are as Always Network. We support small Muslim and non-Muslim led charities with an annual turnover of less than £1 million, who work predominantly with the diverse Muslim communities across the UK. So we do this through workshops, networking and seminars. We are a volunteer-led team, and we all have full-time jobs. So this is a passion of ours, and we do want to assist the community where we can. And we strongly feel that the charity sector plays a vital role in that. And so these are the ways that we work. So we are a networking group. We also facilitate dialogue with funders. We maintain discussions for not-for-profit organizations serving Muslim community needs. We relay funding issues as well, being experienced by NFPs to funders. So if you have any sort of dilemmas, problems, we like to actually have that discussion with funders so they are well aware of what is happening with the community. And we also want to connect funders to NFPs, and you will find out later how we do that. And we also help NFPs to become more institutionally fundable. So we do all of that through our past events. So this is an example. We have an annual event, which is Meet the Funders. This is our flagship event. So we have had various funders in the past, including Garfield Weston, BBC Children in Need, Aziz Foundation, Clothworkers Foundation, Awesome Foundation, Tudor Trust, Lloyds Bank Foundation, Heritage fund Paul Hamlin Foundation as well. These are a few names, and Khosraf. And also we had our launch 2 years ago at East London Mosque. And then we had a bid writing webinar last year where it was teaching tips and tricks on to charities on how to write an effective bid application. We also had a digital marketing webinar last year, and it was to do with branding and online presence for charities. And earlier this year, just before the lockdown, we had a charity digital event, which was absolutely fantastic for charities to come together, peer-to-peer support networking session, and it was fantastic, frank and open, honest conversations from the charities. So our upcoming events for AWN this year, which we've only got a few months left. We have another bid writing workshop, and we have another Meet the Funders event. And we also want to introduce a small charities roundtable. So this will all give us a chance to hear online at least, what the issues are. Because we are working across the UK, we would like to engage with charities from all regions of the UK, so we understand, and we can understand amongst ourselves where the community is at and where it should go. How can we help each other? How can we share resources and just be a bit more effective that way? So that is our plan. On a weekly basis, every Wednesday from 6 till 7, so tomorrow, we offer a advice and support for small charities. So if you have any questions about funding and anything else, we have experts at hand to assist you with your queries. It's normally a small group, so we can offer more time and attention to you, as well as you can connect with other charities as well. So do check out our website to book online. That is alwaysnetwork.org.uk. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just type in Always Network. And the hashtag for today's webinar is hashtag AWN Lottery. Please do tweet about us today, the webinar session. If anybody who still wants to join us, they can. And because it is such an important topic, and it's proven to be quite controversial as well. So it would be good to clarify that. So without further ado, I do want to also introduce you to our first guest. He is Mufti Barkatulla. He is a prominent Islamic Sharia law expert with background in social Muslim community work, in economics and finance. He was trained extensively in Islamic and modern education systems in India and the UK. Mufti has contributed to Muslim community as an imam, lecturer, Sharia judge, developer of Islamic law information databases. He's also an anchor of community televisions, media commentator, and he's also a Sharia advisor of Islamic banks and funds in Europe and Asia, and other membership includes that of Sharia supervisory panels and Halal accreditation board. Subhanallah, Mufti, what a CV. It's an honor to have you here. I believe that you have to quickly dash off, so we will be, to all the attendees, Mufti will be handling his Q&As straight after his talk, so please use the Q&A box to pose your questions, and inshallah he can answer it straight after his talk. So over to you, Mufti.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And this issue has always been the issue of applying for lottery funds for social and community purposes. It has been always live ever since the lottery fund was set up 25 years ago. So I will just start with the metaphoric phrase called money, dirty money or money laundering. I mean, we know that nowadays the £5 or all the notes, they don't get dirty or they don't get laundered. Yeah. So in our language, we are used to attribute things which we perceive in our mind or with our perceptions to things which cannot have that attribute. So previously and currently also, when the money was like a metallic object, and of course gold and silver were used as a money. So money never gets, we cannot say that money is dirty or pure. Money is money, and it is an accounting unit, and it is an entity in itself. It's just a measurement of value, and it's a digit and number nowadays in computers. So neither money is laundered, putting through laundry, nor it is dirty or pure. All the attributes we put with money is to do with this relationship with the way we earn it. So if we earn our money with hard work, we call it pure money and and halal money. But if it has come through illegitimate means, then we call it is a non-halal, haram money and other things. So I will start with the story in mid-90s, when I was in a mosque, and the mosque committee chairman asked me, Mufti Sahab, can you tell me, when we draw all our money from the same banks where all the other people are also depositing and drawing the money, so, and all sorts of legitimate and illegitimate money comes to the bank, and it is we draw our money from the ATM and other places. So how can it be halal and pure while it has gone through so many hands and so many ways and legitimate and illegitimate relationship with human beings? So that is the dilemma with many Muslims and the charities and the community organizations face, that because they perceive act of buying lottery or participating in lottery as impermissible according to Islamic Sharia. So they think that any money given or taken in the name of lottery will become dirty, or it becomes impure and non-halal. So let us go ahead with understanding that, first of all, money is a neutral object. It is neither halal nor haram, or it's neither dirty or not pure. It is just money. So any attribute which is associated in our metaphorical language is to do with our perception and the way it has changed hand. So if it changes hand legitimately for legitimate purposes, then it is a legitimate. So for instance, if we work at a bank, certain works of like logistical work, accounting and IT works in the banks are perceived to be permissible, although the bank is paying from its pool of money. But because we work properly with hard work, so our earnings will become halal and pure. Whether it's coming from which pool or that pool is immaterial, because money is like intrinsic value and it has its own entity. It does not acquire the attributes which are to do with human action. So halal and haram or anything is to do with human action, not to do with money. So when 25 years ago, chairman of Islamic Sharia Council here in London, now we can call him late Dr. Mutawalli Ad-Darsh, the ex-imam of Central Mosque here in London, Regent Park Mosque Imam. He gave fatwa, which was published in Q News, that applying for lottery money is allowed and it is a legitimate purpose. We apply and spend it for charitable purposes, for community and development works. It is allowed. So it caused a lot of furore and lots of discussion. And ever since then, I think it is a nearly consensus that there is nothing wrong in applying for the lottery money because it's was set up with this purpose. Although the act of participating in lottery and buying the lottery ticket may be perceived and declared as unlawful, but the money collected as such is not neither halal or haram. And as if the government has designated it for the purpose of the community development, then it is perfectly logical and allowed to tap into that money and use it, because it has come for the legitimate purpose and for a legitimate avenue for such a money. In Islamic Sharia law and in the history of Islam, there are many examples of like that by changing hand, the status of money becomes different. So there is a story in the Islamic literature about Barira, a free slave of Sayyidina Aisha. Something was given to her as a sadaqah, as a zakat, which she brought at home, and then it was a meat and it was being cooked. And Rasulullah, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was sitting for dinner, he said he was offered some, dry dates and other things, but not offered as meat. And he said, "Don't I smell the smell of, boiling meat?" So they said, "Ya Rasulullah, that is for Barira, and it was given to her as a sadaqah. So, and because you do not eat, you do not entertain, you do not indulge into sadaqah, so that's why we did not offer to you." So the Prophet explained that, once it has changed the hand, for Barira, it is a sadaqah, but from her to coming to me, it is a gift. So the entity, assets, money, they change their status according to the way it has been transacted from one hand to another hand. So based on this principle, whenever money changes hand, it changes the status of it. So whether it was collected and done for whatever purposes, but when it comes to us from the legitimate ways of applying and getting community funding, the lottery money is purely acceptable, and it is legitimate. It's all legitimate to use it. So I can share with you this was surprise for many imams and muftis also. I think like 15 years ago, when in a gathering of like 30 imams, the great prominent mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani Sahab, he was asked about the lottery money, and he said, yes, it is allowed. The whole hall went silent. Then he had to repeat himself. Then he had to say, read my lips. And it was recorded on video that lottery money is legitimate to apply for the community purpose, because by the consensus of the scholars of Islam, all the money which does not belong to a specific, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, it can be utilized for the charitable and community welfare purposes. So, for instance, if there is a money we find which we cannot trace the owner, or where it is like it was acquired not legitimately, but now it has changed its hand through the institutional arrangement or the government legislation, then it changes its status. So this is a general consensus among the scholars that whether the money which is like lost property and things which are collected for the whatever purposes, when it changes hand, and even the like illegitimately acquired money, when it is to be deployed, it has to be deployed for the welfare and public purposes. Because putting, what's called there is a phrase also, throwing your money into the ocean. Yeah. So if some money is illegitimately perceived illegitimate, then throwing into ocean is not an option to waste the money, because wasting money is also a waste of resources. So once we understand that the money is neither pure or dirty, is halal or haram, it's just an entity. It is the way we acquire it that is the more important. So I've been, there are written fatwas and all the other deliberations that for all the community development and charitable purposes, it is legitimate to apply for lottery money. But in the Muslim community, it is perceived to be like a not legitimate. So many people are afraid and they don't apply for it. So I think I've run out of my time, and the general message is that it is perfectly legitimate, and it is by consensus of the scholars that any money which is publicly owned, it can be used for public purposes and in individual life and in the community life. Like I can give example, like most of the charities in UK, they receive the interest money. Interest money is not allowed for personal consumption, but for relief and emergency relief and for relief of poverty, it is allowed. Most of the Muslim charities do receive the interest money, which is accumulated in individuals' account from the bank accounts. So I mean, at least we can treat interest money at par with the lottery money at par with the interest money, and the whole charity sector is eligible, and they should apply and should make use of that money. I think with this brief, I will end my presentation, and I will open myself for any questions in principles and things like that if people have.
Yes, no, you do have a lot of questions, mashallah. But Jazakallah khair for such an informative talk, and I think we've learned so much from this, and this is only touching the tip of the iceberg. But we'll go straight into the questions. Is it okay for charities to use money that people donate from interest accrued on their personal savings?
Yeah, most of the charities, this question we get it during Ramadan and before Ramadan. Most of charities have a special account for handling the interest money, and because it has like some designated avenues, so they treat it separately. They put it in a separate account and use it for emergency relief and hardship relief only.
By the principle of changing hands, which you just mentioned, what would it be hukum of using money that you know has been stolen or acquired through haram, i.e. drug dealing, for example? If someone gives me money and I know for sure it's been earned through haram means, can I now use that for charitable purposes?
Yeah, if there is like 100% information, then it is questionable, because there are ways of acquiring money which is illegitimate, that by stealing one cannot be owner of a money. So if we know that this specific money was stolen, then we cannot take it. But if we do not know, and if it is a mix, then we are allowed to, like Friday collection in every mosque. We do not know who brings money from what sources and for what purpose. So if not knowing or being in a mixed environment gives us a lot of leeway, but it is really like maybe impossible to know exactly that this money is being stolen. But if we, by circumstantial evidence, we suspect it, it is better to avoid.
Just a final question, just because of the time. Does the money actually change ownership? I thought the government itself do not take ownership of this money and just act as agents on behalf of the lottery owner. I think
the heritage fund people will be more in position to explain that it has come to the fund, then it becomes the funds, it's funds property, not the general public property, because it is never returned and there is no contemplation. But one thing which I may have forgot to mention, that the gambling for Muslim it is haram, but for those who are non-believers, which is the vast majority of the lottery participants, it is not, may not be regarded as haram. So many of us have understanding that anything which is haram for us, it is haram for non-Muslim also. So let us understand the principles of fiqh is that individual things like riba money and other things may be legitimate for the non-Muslims. So under the Islamic rule, the swine, wine, and riba was prevalent among the non-Muslims, and it was under Muslim rule they were practicing it, but Muslims did not deal with it. So what is illegitimate for me to do, it may not be illegitimate for other communities to do. So most of the money accumulated in lottery is from the the general population, which they think is perfectly legitimate. So we will not impose our opinion on others, but we'll take it as they perceive it. So generally that non-Muslims are not responsible for all halal and haram matters which we observe in our life. So for instance, the haram meat and other many haram things which are sold in the Muslim shops, and we transport it, we do it, we work for the many non-Muslims. It is a perfectly legitimate way of earning us money, whether it came to the other people from whatever sources, whichever they regard it as a legitimate, we will not question we will not be imposing our opinion on others.
Well, Jazakallah khair, Mufti. It's been a pleasure to have you and for everybody listening to what you've had to say. We've just run out of time, but inshallah, if you do have any more questions for the Mufti, please do email us or post it in the chat function and then Q&A function, and then we'll ask Mufti later to answer it, and then we can put it up on our website.
To be able to deal with any other side issues, or maybe qualified the answers which I gave maybe in general because of the shortage of time, Mufti Faraz will be able to put it in context and give all the conditions and situations about surrounding this in detailed question. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Have a lovely day. Inshallah. Keep us in your du'as, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was a fantastic chat, and now introducing Mufti Faraz Adam. He is a well-known UK-based Islamic finance and fintech consultant, and he heads the global Sharia advisory firm Amana Advisors. He is also on a number of global Sharia boards in the countries such as Switzerland, Bahrain, Canada, Singapore, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Canada, and the US, and he has published over a dozen research papers in contemporary Islamic finance. Mufti has completed a 6-year Alima program in the UK, after which he went on to complete the Iftar course in South Africa, and he holds a master's degree in Islamic finance, banking and management at Newham University in the UK. He's also attained various finance industry qualifications such as IFQ, CIFE, and a certified Sharia advisor and auditor. And he's completed an MBA diploma and has completed a fintech specialization from the University of Michigan. And he's currently an ACCA candidate and studying to become a qualified independent financial advisor with the CISI. Wow, what an introduction, mashallah. Over to you, Mufti.
No, Jazakallah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure listening to Mufti Barkatulla, and really just continuing with the conversation. I think it's look, we all know that the lottery is a form of gambling. That's why it's regulated by the Gambling Commission, right? It's a very clear matter. And the notion of gambling in Islam, we need to understand very clearly that it's detrimental and harmful for society. Why is gambling prohibited? It's because in Islam and Islamic law and for the Islamic economy, the idea is that to gain value, you have to give value. You shouldn't receive any funding or anything without giving something and really, working for it. So this idea and this kind of mindset where we earn easy money, it's not befitting for a community. The way to make an economy productive is by labor, by entrepreneurship, by investing. And so gambling, what it does, it creates this kind of scenario where people are earning huge sums without really putting in the effort. They might be putting a couple of pounds in and they're earning. But what that does is it creates a society in the long term where there's some people winning, some people losing. And that creates an imbalance in society. So there's many reasons why gambling is prohibited in Islam. Another reason which the Quran very clearly mentions is that it can create animosity, right? Gambling can create animosity, rancor, and hatred. Where if you and I, as an example, two of us in a household were gambling and you won and I lost, right? Or we both applied to the lottery and you won and I lost, straight away I'll start feeling, why didn't I win? I also took part. It can create a series of negative thoughts and perceptions in a person's mind. And we've seen a number of winners have come, right? It's not always rosy. Just the idea of winning, large sums, it's not always rosy because their life cannot sustain the new life. And that's a reality. And just because we see a person, he's on a day job, he's, just struggling to earn, but then all of a sudden he wins the lottery, he's a millionaire. That switch in life and, completely revolving the life, sometimes it's unsustainable for the person himself or for whoever it may be, because it's such a huge jump. And that really shows that mentally people are not, always made to, like switch over to some kind of new fantasy life overnight. And so there's many reasons and wisdoms behind the principles of Islam. That's what we believe in. That's our worldview. We don't want a society where there's gambling addicts. Nobody wants that. We don't want a society where there's hatred, animosity, there's rancor in the society. We want a harmonious society. So that's really the backdrop of lottery and why it's prohibited completely. So not only does it have a micro implications, it also has macro implications. And every ruling in Islam has a micro and macro implication. We have to accept that, we have to understand that any action that we do, for example, riba, interest dealings, has a micro and macro element. It impacts micro, the borrowers, but also at a macro level, it's impacting the economy. Gambling does the same thing, right? Any prohibition, financial prohibition, it affects the macro economy and it also affects the micro. So there's many like jigsaw pieces that we have to put together to understand this prohibition and wisdom in its entirety. And with saying that, yes, scholars have, as Mufti Barkatulla has rightly mentioned, there have been scholars who've said that to apply for funding from the lottery, the funds would be lawful. And why? Because non-Muslims in lands which are not Islamic countries, right? In non-Islamic countries, like we have the UK and wherever else, they are not governed by Islamic principles, meaning the non-Muslims, they don't have to abide by, the Islamic principles. Therefore, it's completely, whatever they do, the transaction that they make with the lottery is permissible. Yes, of course, a Muslim, he cannot do that. For him to go and transact with the lottery, that's unlawful. Likewise, a Muslim, his earnings, if he has unlawful earnings, this idea of changing hands, it's not valid for a Muslim. So if a Muslim earns unlawful money and comes and gives it to me, and I know that, it's not right for me to take that money because that money was earned in an unlawful way. So for non-Muslims, what they do, they are not bound by Sharia principles, and therefore the prohibition of gambling wouldn't apply to them in non-Muslim lands, we're talking specifically. For Muslims, it still applies because we are morally bound, right? It's our worldview that this is wrong for the community and society. It doesn't add any value or favor to the community. And then with saying that, my kind of take and my kind of approach to this very particular question, can charities apply for lottery funding? Personally, I know the technical kind of understanding of it. I completely understand how scholars have said it's permissible, and the way they say it, it's the funds itself. But personally, I don't find that. I find it would be better for Muslim charities not to avail of funding unless it's a requirement, unless there's no other funding available. Why do I say that? It's because it's kind of hypocritical. Personally, the way I see it, I mean, at one end of the spectrum, we're saying lottery is prohibited, lottery is not permissible. Oh yeah, but go and apply for the lottery funding. And by applying for lottery funding, are we inadvertently promoting or at least showing some kind of whatever, some kind of agreement with the concept of lottery? I know in principle we don't agree with it, but being involved in that same ecosystem, and then on top of that, what if there's a clause or there's a string attached where you might have to say that this is funded by the lottery, and inadvertently promoting the lottery? And so are we creating an economy, a society whereby lottery is becoming, I don't want to use the word whitewashed, right? You get the word sports washing, right? We've been reading in the news, but are we washing over the concept of lottery? And this is my concern as just as a citizen in the UK, as a member of the society, because I don't find it to be an ethical practice. So those are my ethical concerns I have. Is it something which we should be actively promoting, actively taking, or why can't we generate our own ways to tap into different funds? I mean, nowadays we have this concept of waqf in Islam, and there are new projects being formed of waqf, and waqf is there to provide funds to charities and good works from all walks of life. So we have many institutions within our Islamic framework which would support small charities and good endeavors. So with that being said, if a charity, I know the view of a number of scholars that it's lawful, and I agree technically, from a very technical perspective, the funds itself can be passed on to a charity. But there's a big difference here. And this is what I want to highlight. I mean, and this is really commenting also on Mufti Barakatullah's viewpoint and what scholars mention, that one is receiving, because the analogy was given about receiving interest and everything. That's incidental. What I mean by that is, you're not going to apply for interest. Rather, people are coming and giving the interest to you. And yes, from an Islamic perspective, charities are seen like recycling plants. Think of it like that. A charity is a recycling plant. All forms of funds come into it, impure funds as well. Their job is to recycle and put it back into community and welfare projects, and for the poor and needy and those suffering. So a charity is a recycling plant per se, and they are just receiving funds and giving. So one is interest coming to you incidentally, but when it comes to funding from the lottery and these kinds of other funds available, you have to actively apply, and there's a difference between that. You're now saying we want this for X, Y, Z. So there's just another layer of complexity. It's not as simple as receiving funds. Secondly, a charity is the disposer of impure income. That's the role of a charity. So if there was some need requirement for Islamic charity to acquire for funding, then given the view of so many scholars of it being acceptable, then if they were to do so, they should do so with a mindset of not getting funding. Rather, their mindset should be, we're trying to purify this income and give it away for the good of the community. That should be the mindset. But you should always look for better funds. Regardless, it's really an ethical question and a moral question, for ourselves. When we apply for these fundings and we take part in this, I mean, can you justify to yourself that? Because this is a question which I've been asked before. On one stance, on one hand of the balance, you say it's not permissible, yet you're completely fine with applying for it at the same time and benefiting from it. So that creates some kind of imbalance in me personally, but it might not do for everyone else, but it does definitely play up on my conscience. And that's why I hesitate to encourage people actively tapping into these funds. Although, as the view of the scholars are, it is potentially valid. The funds, I mean, your role as a charity is to recycle these funds. That is your role, and with that mindset, you're just recycling. But then again, it's a matter of having a mindset. It's a matter of really ensuring that we don't normalize the lottery, and neither does it mean that we're advertising for the lottery. Because, and this is just from my personal experience, what I've seen somewhere where it said this was like, funded by the lottery. Now, if that is a condition of receiving the funding, then that hosts another whole series of questions. How are you now promoting the lottery in any way, shape, or form? So, and also, and this is a vital point before I finish, is because are we, by Islamic charities, taking funding, are we adding to the narrative and giving more strength to this practice of lottery, that they can say, yes, although we do the lottery activities, whatever, 55p or whatever, the pence that goes to the player, but we're also giving for good causes. So we're overall a good thing in nature. Are we adding some kind of ethical legitimacy to a practice which clashes with our view for society? That's a real question that we need to pose. And is that a strategy, a good strategy for the long term, or do we want a strategy, or do we want a community which evades these kinds of activities altogether? And of course, majority of scholars agree that a mosque or an Islamic institution which teaches Quran and Hadith and these things, they should not go near these fundings. I mean, this is the view of a number of scholars as well. So what we're talking about specifically are charities for welfare and for the community and society. We're not talking about mosques and Islamic institutions. So, with that, this is really my 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Faraz, really informative as well. It's like two heavyweights weighing in on the conversation is fantastic. I know that because time is so limited, again, like I said, that this is only the tip of the iceberg, and inshallah, we hope to host some more events about this and in more greater detail, because we had some questions. I am going to just say questions that maybe some people might not want to share, but I have met Muslims who say that it is acceptable for them to buy and play the lottery because the money goes to charity. If we start accepting lottery funding, then Muslims will start considering acceptable to gamble via the lottery. The church was against this lottery at the beginning, but now don't say anything against it. The same is happening in Muslim countries. Why risk this?
I totally agree. I have no objections against that, because I think it's not a matter of, it's a long-term strategy. People change perceptions and minds over a generation. And so if this is normalized today, we have to think long-term, what doors does it open?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a non-Muslim-led charity, but we are based in Tower Hamlets and work with a lot of people from the Muslim community. I want to know how we go around telling our beneficiaries where the money for the projects is coming from, etc. What should we do to be more transparent?
I mean, as a charity, transparency, is key in everything that we do. We should have good governance in all our structures, in all our, companies. So, we should be very clear and open that this is how we're getting funded, whether it's lottery or wherever it may be. It's just good for your organization.
Okay. Somebody said, wasn't Mufti Taqi Usmani's view that it can be used on the poor and needy, not just general charity purposes, financing projects and salaries, etc.?
I mean, to be honest, I think I was quite young in that gathering, which Mufti Barkatulla was referring to. So I wasn't there, unfortunately. But from his, I've read a fatwa from his student, which is Mufti Muhammad, and he writes that Mufti Taqi Uthmani confirmed, I'm quoting exactly what he said. He says, Mufti Taqi Uthmani recently in a Q&A session confirmed this by stating that it is permitted to avail of the lottery fund in order to spend on the poor and needy and to finance other public welfare projects. So this can be found online, this reference and quote, from his student, so it's quite authentic.
I'm a Muslim charity doing projects for Muslims in mental health and ex-offenders rehabilitation. Gosh, I can't even say the word. I'm getting a little support from Muslim organizations. Therefore, I am able to apply even to them for general services. I'm assuming lottery.
I mean, so it just goes back to, the scholars, of course, the scholars as Mufti Barkatulla said, that there is potential scope to apply for funding from the lottery, but it's something which needs to be. I wouldn't advocate it publicly, or neither would I advocate it, unrestrictedly. That's my personal take on it. Of course, Mufti Barkatulla was very, okay with the idea. So it just depends on, and this is a reality in these matters. It just goes, there's two things that it comes down to. One is your conscience, really, how you feel about it as a person, because it does have an impact. Because the scholars will differ, and we know this as, as members of a Muslim community. There are always two views on everything, right? So it's all about, which scholars do you look up to, which arguments make more sense to you, what, befits your conscience, right? And, you're more than welcome, as long as you're following a scholarly opinion that's valid, right, in the scholarly world, then you will not be accountable per se, because you fulfill your duty of following a valid opinion from the scholars.
Just a final question, is it okay to accept a job funded by the lottery?
I mean, there just needs to be more clarity on what job it is, because and why is it funded. So I think it's a very, there's much more requirements for that question before it's answered.
Okay. Inshallah, they can be a bit more elaborative later. But Jazakallah khair, Mufti Faraz, it's been an honor to have you here as well. And our time is up, but inshallah, we'll have you back on and we can go into more detail later.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu
alaikum. Just now it's time to introduce our next panelists. There's two of them. It's Liz Ellis, who is the Policy and Project Manager, and Chris, who is the Engagement Officer at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So I'd just like to introduce you to them, but before we do, it is poll time, as you can see right in front of you. Has your charity ever applied for lottery funding? Thanks, admin, for reminding me about the poll. This is interesting. No. Majority are saying no at the moment. Some people have said yes, and some people have said unsure. Okay, let's get the results up. Let's let the people see what they have said. Right, majority of people have said, this is getting interesting. So, as I was introducing earlier, let's kickstart off with Heritage Fund now. Liz Ellis and Chris Mason, who will be elaborating a bit more about Heritage Fund. I don't want to talk too much about the history of it because you'll be speaking that. Hi Liz, how are you?
Hello Aisha, thank you so much, and thank you to both Muftis for this opportunity. I really welcome this chance to be together today and to have these honest and, as the Mufti was just speaking, transparent conversations. So I'm Liz Ellis, I'm Policy Project Manager for the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And I'm going to give a bit of the context for the National Lottery Heritage Fund, broad context. And then I'm going to pass to my colleague, Chris Mason, who, as Aisha says, is based in London South Team as an engagement manager. So first of all, my role, I work across the UK and I lead policies on inclusion and well-being. And while the Muftis were speaking, I was thinking about the experience that we have all been having in the UK and across the world over these months, and also the disproportionate impact we know the pandemic has had on many minority communities, including Muslim communities in the UK. So when I'm speaking about some of the work of the Heritage Fund, I think I will come back to the role of equalities and structural inequalities and how at the Heritage Fund we work with these areas of concern for all of us, I know, on this call today. So this photograph shows a current project in Manchester, which we'll come back to later in the presentation. But if I could have the next slide, please. So to follow on from how both Muftis were referring earlier, so the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which Chris and I work for, is one of the 12 National Lottery Families Good Causes. And as we've heard, it's been going for 25 years. And there's a range of different organisations that these 12 good causes fund. If we could have the next slide, please. So we're just listing the range of those 12 good causes. So you see them, we're towards the bottom, the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I think also on this call is the National Lottery Community Fund. And some of you will recognise some of the different organisations. But as I say, we're a UK funder, and you may recognise some of these logos. We can talk more about the role of how we promote our funding later on in the presentation. But if we could go to the next slide now. So to be absolutely clear, as both Muftis have said, we get our money, the money we use at the National Lottery Heritage Fund comes from people who play the lottery. And we take that responsibility really seriously. So I've just shown a couple of examples on this slide. A few years ago, we were commemorating the anniversary of the First World War. And the top image shows two young women in Scotland who were looking at some of the contributions that Muslim communities had made to the First World War in Scotland, doing some research and work together to raise the profile of that contribution 100 years ago. And the bottom image shows a work by brilliant disability-led organisation in Glasgow. So I think the ethical concerns that both Muftis have raised are really to the forefront in how we make decisions. And I think I'd like us to just move on to the next slide to have a little more context by what we mean by heritage. This is something that Chris will come back to in his presentation, but we interpret heritage very broadly. So some of us, for example, on this call today might have visited our local parks recently, really valued that opportunity to be outdoors during these very challenging months. Some of us might be familiar with local museums or archives, but also it's people's experiences. And Chris is going to share an example later, a cultural tradition, in this case later, of embroidery. It's people's lived experience and memories. And I know Sado, director of Black Southwest Network and the Heritage Fund, we work closely together. And Sado will speak, I'm sure, about areas of work that she has led across the Southwest based on people's experience of living in the UK now. If we can have the next slide, please. So we're currently in a funding framework where this runs for the next 5 years, and this role we have in creating positive and lasting change for people and communities now in the future. I'm just touching on the slide on the right. This comes, I know many people on the call today are from London, not all I know, but some. And some of you will be familiar with the Jeffrey Museum work that is being undertaken there to mark the museum, the home, as it will be renamed. And this shows a young woman describing, leading a tour demonstrating the history of the Jeffrey Museum. While on the left, another young woman is demonstrating some of the amazing maritime heritage in another part of England. So very broad range of work that we fund. If we could go to the next slide, please. And I think really in terms of our priorities, thinking about the need for lottery investment and the range of outcomes that there isn't time today to go into detail of our outcomes, but really thinking about what heritage means for very different people and communities across the UK. We can have the next slide, please. So, as I say, for today, I won't go into detail of our outcomes, but I just want to concentrate on the top one here. So our mandatory outcome is that a wider range of people will be involved in heritage. And for me, as I lead inclusion policies across the UK, that is so important in terms of how we think for all of us about a sense of belonging and identity and what our identities have in common, but also our differing identities. and how we can share and learn with each other. So we'll move to the next slide. And that aspect as a funder, when both Muftis were referring to the kind of benefits and outcomes, we've given a few examples here. I think removing barriers and introducing new audiences to heritage is something that Chris will speak about a little bit more in a minute. But enabling people to tell their own stories, for us to learn from each other, to share experiences. I think that aspect of being able to listen to each other is one of the reasons I really, really appreciate the opportunity to join this event today. I think that's something across the UK, we can all really benefit, how we listen and learn with each other. If we can have the next slide, please. So I talked about the mandatory outcome being to involve a wider range of people in heritage. And this example, Accentuate, is a disability-led organisation who explored over 3 years the history of disabled people's contribution across the UK. And we've listed a few examples of what we mean by inclusion. So thinking about diversity in the workplace, opportunities for training, apprenticeships, sometimes really concrete access costs. So to ensure that where people use languages other than English, there's translation budgets put into place, enabling governance to be more diverse, taking heritage opportunities out and about. All these are areas that we fund. I'll go to the next slide, please. I wanted to share this example with you of 2 young learning disabled people where they were sharing their experience at a public event of a mentoring relationship where, as 2 young learning disabled people, they were sharing their own experience and learning, gaining confidence, which they were then able to use in special schools to support other young learning disabled people to take on leadership roles. And as I say, in the time we have today, I won't go into much more detail, but I think we'd all recognise there are really crucial opportunities that need to take place now to enable young people to have opportunities ahead. And for disabled people, disabled young people in particular, this is really important. So we've got this mandatory outcome. You know, we can talk more about that perhaps in Q&A, but we'll go to our next slide, please. So before I hand to Chris, I'm just going to talk very briefly about the slide we opened with, Our Shared Cultural Heritage, which is a 3-year partnership project taking place across Manchester, but with the input of young people from Glasgow, input from a UK-wide youth organisation. And here you see some of the participants and the Muslim academic lead, Dr. Habib. If we can have our next slide, please. So the aims of this project, you can see here, are to explore this aspect of cultural identity, connecting with others across South Asian heritage, and it provides very concrete opportunities for young people to think about careers and work ahead in terms of sharing difference, which is often, I think, we'd all recognise ideas of identity is contested, history is not neutral. It's really important that we're able to talk honestly. Some of the work we've all been aware recently by Black Lives Matter show how crucial it is for us all. We have opportunities to explore identity and explore, for example, in this project, partition, the legacies of partition. So if we could have the next slide, please. I'm going to hand now to Chris, who will speak more from an engagement perspective from London and South. Over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Chris Mason. I'm part of the engagement team at the National Lottery Heritage Fund, covering the London and South area, which, as you can see in the map on the slide there, covers areas from Kent all the way to Cornwall. what I do in my role, as kind of outlined here, is that I help to promote our funding programs and other opportunities that don't necessarily involve grant giving. At the moment, our main funding program is on pause, as we focus on distributing emergency funding to heritage organisations to keep them operating during the pandemic. But we are running a 2-year initiative called Digital Skills for Heritage, which aims to raise digital skills and confidence for organisations through online training courses. And there's more information on that on our website, and there's a link here on the slide, and I think these can be shared around to you all afterwards. I'm also available to advise people on any project ideas that they have before they apply to us at the fund. And we do this through a project inquiry service, which also offers, but we also offer enhanced support to priority applicants through either one-to-one discussions or workshops. And inclusion is a priority for us, so that means that we want to offer that support to people who are, or groups who are underserved or whose voices are kind of seldom heard when it comes to heritage. We also offer enhanced support to groups who are based or work in what we refer to as areas of focus. And within our London and South region, that consists of the boroughs of Brent, Enfield and Newham. So if you're in any of those boroughs, then we can also offer additional support. My contact details are on this slide as well as our website and our regional Twitter account for your information later. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as Liz mentioned earlier, we define heritage broadly with this statement. There's anything from the past that we value and want to pass on to future generations. And it's really important to us as an organisation that you tell us what you value within your communities. And this could be something intangible, such as people's memories or cultural traditions, such as performance arts, festivals or crafts, and I'll be talking about an example in a moment. Or it could be something tangible and more physical, such as a building or a collection of documents or objects, or even green local space. So nature is another one of our priorities, and whether that's species of wildlife that need protecting, or the conservation of our countryside or our urban green spaces, such as parks, as Liz mentioned. We really want to encourage people to see their local green spaces as heritage that is there for everyone to enjoy and benefit from. Can I get the next slide? Great, thank you. So I thought, just to illustrate this briefly, what heritage can be, I'd like us to take a moment to pause and just, if you can have a think about an object in your home that you value most. Just try and picture what that object might be. Great. So if you've got an object in mind, kind of, you know, think about what that object is and why it's special to you. It could be because of where that object came from or who gave it to you, whatever that story is behind it. Those are the kinds of stories that can be a real starting point for starting to explore what heritage is for you and your communities. And that's kind of, you know, quite often when we have projects come in, you know, they'll often start from something as simple as something that somebody has in their attic, or, you know, or whatever. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So I just want to show you another example of the sorts of projects that we funded in the past and what that looks like in practice. So this project, run by the Punjabi Centre, compared to the Shared Cultural Heritage project that Liz mentioned, this is a much smaller size project, and it was a grant from us of about £9,500. It's an oral history project about the traditional art of Folkari embroidery. Volunteers on the project got to see the Folkari collections in the V&A, and people were invited to an event to share their own folklore items and stories, which were recorded and broadcast on community radio and featured in a touring exhibition, which raised awareness of this traditional art. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So just to highlight then what these projects have in common, the ones that Liz has mentioned and the one I just talked about, they start with a very clear idea of what the heritage is that is at the center of the project. In other words, as we were saying, what it is that they value and want to pass on to future generations.
I think Chris is frozen, and maybe Liz can actually just take over, possibly.
Okay, thank you. So I think this is just coming to the end of our presentation. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So that just gives you a sense of the range of grants that are available. I'm conscious of time, and I know that you'll be sharing these presentations. So if we now go to the last slide, please. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and we'll look forward to questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Hi, Chris. You're back. You're
back. Hi, sorry.
It's in time, but it's okay. Liz came to the rescue. Thank you so much, and please stay around because we will be taking Q&As in a bit. So let me introduce you all to our final guest, our panelist, Sado Jiirde. She is the director of Black Southwest Network and has worked for the organization since 2007 when she was the policy officer, and she became the director in 2013. And since then, Sado has worked tirelessly to raise the profile of racial inequality faced by Black and minority ethnic communities at strategic and policy levels, regionally and nationally, as well as locally in Bristol. She utilizing over 10 years of experience working in the racial justice sector. Her professional and personal mission is to provide evidence-based understanding of the systemic impact of racial and socioeconomic structural inequalities and develop community-led solutions to achieve a more equitable society. And under her leadership, BSWN focuses on creating meaningful relationships within the Black-led sector and beyond, bringing together Black-led organizations and communities with funders, social investors, cultural institutions, politicians, and professionals. And Sado was, mashallah, awarded the African Achievers Award in 2015, as well as the Most Inspirational Role Model Award by the West Women of the Year Awards in 2019. And she is a Fellow of Royal Society of Arts and is proud to have been made a visiting Fellow to University of Bath in 2020. Wow, Sado, what a CV right there. No further introductions, I'll leave it to you now.
Thank you so much for that really good introduction. And thank you so much for having me here. So I'll talk about the experience of BSWN and the work that we've done with the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I have worked with Liz for the last 5 years, so I'll just reflect on that experience very quickly from an organizational perspective. And just to say, Black Southwest Network is a non-Muslim organization, but we do work with the Muslim community. So in terms of Black Southwest Network, it's a regional race equality infrastructure organization based in Bristol, but works across the southwest of England. And fairly, it is around addressing racial inequality. We do that through taking an evidence-based approach. So we undertake a lot of research, but jointly with the community to co-produce solutions. We also very much focus on infrastructure and capacity building. And that is across the board with community organizations, social enterprises, but also with entrepreneurs. But at the heart of our work is mainly giving a voice to the community and fighting for racial justice. We have two focus areas that we work around. One is economic inclusion, and the other one is cultural inclusion. So I'll focus on cultural inclusion for this talk. So in terms of our cultural inclusion, that really started 10 years ago. And it was fairly an accident by a PhD student from America, Dr. Nicole Truesdale. And she was doing a research in the UK looking at race identity and was based at BSWN. There was really a lack of information on the history of Black-led organizations in the Southwest. And I think that just started from there. And that led to a project, a conversation with then HLF. And we submitted a bid. We were successful with that. We did that piece of work. And subsequently, that led to 4 projects that we've delivered in the past, including the one that I'm just going to talk about. So from that project, what really became clear from our work is the interconnection between heritage and race. And I don't think that's fairly explored enough. As a research policy focused organization, we also found heritage at the heart of our policy work, which is mainly around race and identity. You cannot talk about race from a policy level without really talking about heritage, identity, and the everyday experience of either Black or Asian communities. So I think we began to develop a model of really exploring using heritage to be able to also shape our policy work. The work really evolved from the first project, which was Back to the Future, looking at the history of community organizations. And that became quite clear by looking at the history of Black organization. The one key thing for those organizations, why those organizations were created, perhaps were issues of race and discrimination, the lack of it that created these organizations. The second thing was very much around stories, perhaps what would be defined as community heritage. And again, at the heart of that, whose stories are we telling? How were those stories told? And perhaps the role of museums and cultural organizations. One of the key things that consistently that we found working in partnership with cultural organization is the lack of engagement, as they would put it, but also the lack of representation of Black or Asian communities consuming, accessing cultural offers. I think what we subsequently found is to really explore a more community-led approach, trying to really define heritage the way we saw it, as opposed to how heritage is defined, which for most of the time, it's actually physical heritage. So you have the museums, you have the churches, and that most of the time does not speak to the communities that we work with. Perhaps for our communities, it's more around community heritage, and you would have things around, you're talking about stories, you're talking about lived experiences, what would be perhaps now defined as intangible cultural heritage, but that's not fairly represented in the space of heritage. So our ambition was to really drive that, and we were very lucky to work with National Lottery Heritage Fund to really begin to question heritage in the most traditional way that it was being presented and perceived, and begin to move to ways where it is less, it's more about how communities define heritage. In that sense, we've been very successful to work with them strategically to also shape that and evolving and moving as the project moved along to get to a place of really beginning to center and define intangible cultural heritage and beginning to take that very seriously. I think at the heart of driving the intangible cultural heritage project, but it's also centering intangible cultural heritage within physical heritage. And I think that's really important so that we don't end up creating intangible cultural heritage to be something which is distant, but away from physical heritage, the museum. So part of the work is the research that we are undertaking now, really looking and taking a decolonized approach, working with museums, looking at how history is told, through which lens that history is told. And we really know when it comes to museums, you have colonialism, you have empire, and museum are perhaps the best representation of that. And there's significant challenges within museums around how do you move to a decolonial space. So just to sum up, in terms of our final project, it really focuses on intangible cultural heritage, but also significantly working with museums and cultural organizations to really begin to get inclusive ways of those organizations operating, representation, and perhaps leading to a space where, from the work that we're doing with the communities, but we're also changing the space within cultural organization and to arrive at a place where both of those sides are shifting. Out of that, it's an 18-month project which has 4 strands. One strand is the capturing and the preservation of intangible cultural heritage from the community, and we're collecting a lot of stories. The second strand is the capacity building. So how do you develop those organizations or individual within the communities to have the skills to be able to capture the stories, to be able to retell the stories in a meaningful way. And the final part is working with cultural organizations and museums to be able to change the practice and get them to be more inclusive and reflective of communities that they serve. So the project is coming to an end in October. We will publish the research from the project, and we're hoping that the next phase of the project really capturing the current environment, the discussion around the Black Lives Matter, and perhaps moving to more a decolonized museum. It's the ambition for the next phase of the project. From the work that we've done, I think there is a space where communities can be allowed and supported to really be more ambitious in terms of how they own, how they create, and how they represent themselves within the cultural space, working alongside museums. So that's where we're at. I think I'm over my 5 minutes, but just to give you an example of an organization and what that looks like, I think the key highlight from the relationship that we've had with the National Lottery Heritage Fund has been being very, very supportive, being very understanding of the direction, and being allowed to really drive where we want to take the project, and really listening to that. We've had very good relationship with the local development officer, and that has been a long-term relationship for the last 10 years, allowing the evolution from perhaps a project delivery to a more strategic partner. And I think I'll leave it there. So it's been a delight to work with Liz and the team in terms of driving this forward.
Thank you very much. That's excellent to hear firsthand what you've used the money for, and it's always great to hear case studies, because I think then other charities can relate to what you're doing. So thank you so much for that. If we can have Chris and Liz from Heritage Fund to come back on the screens, and then we can use this time. We've only got less than 10 minutes left till the end of this webinar, and we'll use this time to do some Q&As. So the first question is, and a lot of the questions are for Heritage, does all of the lottery money come from gambling proceeds? If not, where does the rest of the money come from?
So all the money that we use at the National Lottery Heritage Fund comes from people who play the National Lottery. Yes, it does come from National Lottery players. Right,
simple. Are the lottery able to differentiate between their incoming pots of money? If so, could they offer Muslim charities the opportunity to apply for money from different pots other than that which comes in from playing the game?
Thank you very much for that question. So The short answer for National Lottery Heritage Fund is no, we can't do that. All our money comes from the National Lottery. I know that's a different context with the Arts Council, where there is a direct strand of income from Department Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS. So my understanding is that there is an opportunity through the Arts Council to apply for a separate strand. But I should say, reiterate, but for National Lottery Heritage Fund, all our money comes from National Lottery players. So that's not possible with us.
Do you know how many Muslim charities generally apply for lottery funding? Do you know?
I don't know the overall figure, but for National Lottery Heritage Fund, I was looking at our stats. Over the last 25 years, we funded over 100 organisations which are led by Muslim organisations, and the sum at the moment is over £4 million. And I think for me, one of the reasons why this event today is so important is for us to be able to go on having these conversations, because we absolutely understand that Muslim communities feel very differently about the use of lottery money. But as I was saying, we have a mandatory inclusion outcome, and we're really keen to ensure that we can have these conversations so that organisations who may want to learn more about our funding have that chance.
Another question is, does the National Lottery fund faith-based charities? Lots of funders won't fund religious organisations.
To fund faith-based charities, we can't fund religious activity, the promotion of religion, but we can fund a faith organisation to carry out a heritage project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And do charities have to use and publicise the lottery if they are funded? Maybe through.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a condition of funding that any organisation that receives money from a lottery good cause has to share that and promote that, and that is a condition of our funding.
So is sharing meaning that it should go on the website?
Yes, so for example, if a building is restored, then we would expect that to be acknowledged on publicity outside the building, in social media. Chris, you might want to share some other examples.
Yes, I mean, it's generally, the main thing is, it comes, that our logo is kind of visible really in any kind of, on a website, or any kind of materials that are created using our funds. And just generally, we do ask for, that to be acknowledged in kind of press release, that sort of thing.
Yeah. This is a question for Sado. Have you had any of your supporters question that you receive National Lottery funding?
No, actually, which is quite interesting. When I was looking at that question, one of the key things that you have to do with funding, you have to publicize. But I also think we've always been open about that because we work with diverse communities. We've done projects. We've had significant engagement from the Somali community, from the Asian community. But we've never had question, but we've always been very open so that for transparency, and if people have any question or feel uncomfortable, then they genuinely know that. So we've been very upfront. We never had any questions.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even from Heritage, have you had any backlashes or from the Muslim sort of charities? And can you discuss any concerns that you've come across, that we can just have this frank conversation?
Yes, in my policy role, I have experienced some public events where I absolutely recognise there are concerns, not only from some Muslim organisations, but some other faith organisations, for example, Quakers or Methodists, have concerns about taking money from gambling. And my policy position and that of the Heritage Fund is we absolutely want to listen and discuss these issues. I really appreciated when the Muftis earlier were speaking about these are really significant ethical and moral questions for all of us. And so I really welcome that opportunity to talk about these areas of concern together.
Yeah, Absolutely. Sado, a question for you. Did you find the application process and reporting back? How did you find the application process and reporting back requirements? Sorry.
It's a really interesting one. I think we've had a 10-year relationship. I don't know whether we're an exception, and we've been very lucky, but we've had a 10-year relationship. So Kelly, who is the development officer, I've known Kelly for the last 10 years. And we've really worked together every time we have an idea. And I remember when we first applied and then we're moving to the second project, it's when we'd completely lost funding as an organization. But it was the one area that I wanted to explore, which was around race, identity, and really understanding that. And going back to Kelly with, I'm really sorry, the nightmare of working from home. Bear with me, I'll just
Right. Let me go to heritage very quickly. So if all Muslim charities and organizations stopped interacting with lottery funding, how would it impact the inclusion/diversity policy of National Lottery? And is it also in the interest of National Lottery to keep Muslim organizations on board?
So what a great question. That's a really good question. And I'm conscious that we have 4 minutes before the end. So I think for me, this whole discussion demonstrates how important it is that we keep talking. I personally, over the years, I've been in my role for 5 years. I've had really useful conversations, whether it's been with the Inclusive Mosque Initiative or many of the people on the call today, with yourselves at Always Network. You know, this is an evolving debate. I would be really disappointed if we stopped having conversations with Muslim organizations. We don't have to agree with each other. I just think that it's important, it's crucial in the UK now that we continue discussing these issues.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I think it's very accessible and it's very easy, but I think there is a perception of the Heritage Lottery that is perhaps not seen accessible, but from the process and work that we've done with them, it's very easy to apply. They're very supportive because they have a development officer to work with you. So yeah, it's been very easy, but I think it's a perception issue because they're probably seen as funding physical heritage, less around cultural, but they're extremely accessible.
Excellent. That is all we have time for, unfortunately, but we will be asking our people, our attendees, this final question. Has your opinion changed on lottery funding after this webinar? Do put your answers in. Majority, wow, it's very overwhelming. It's very overwhelming. Wow, mashallah. Let's share the results. What have people said? Let's share it. There we go. People have said yes. And okay, now it's like more than 50% yes and just under no, and some are unchanged. But today's discussion, although it is very short, 90 minutes, this doesn't do it justice on this topic. But as I mentioned earlier, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it will be a beginning of many in-depth events, sessions, webinars. It's going to be fantastic, inshallah. But Jazakallah khair for joining us. After you end this webinar, there will be a short feedback form that we'd really love for you to fill in. And as you can imagine, as charities yourselves, we always want to listen to what our beneficiaries and service users have to say so we can improve our services as well. And on that note, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us, the panelists, Mufti Barkatulla, Mufti Faraz, Sado, Liz and Chris from Heritage Fund, and of course the team behind all of this, Fatma, who's doing the admin stuff, and the team who are on WhatsApp who are supporting us, and everybody who has supported us as well. So thank you for your time, and inshallah this will be recorded and it will be online, and just check out our social media network and newsletter to find out where you can see this recording, inshallah. And any questions that haven't been answered, unfortunately, I'm very sorry that I couldn't go through them, but I will try and pose it to the muftis, and if not, it can be left to the next session, inshallah. So thank you very much. Apologies for anything I said wrong. It comes from me, but all good comes from Allah. And Jazakallah khair. Until next time. Assalamu alaikum.